Hi again, 7th graders. This video will help you to review for your upcoming quiz, Quiz 2. So first, some vocabulary. You'll need to recall what an idiom is. An idiom is an expression whose meaning is not predictable from the usual meanings of its words. For example, to kick the bucket. You don't literally go out and kick a bucket. You actually die when we use the expression kick the bucket. So that is an idiom. Disgruntled. Remember, they talk about Peter being disgruntled. So he is displeased and discontented. A symbol is often an ordinary object, event, person, or animal to which society has attached extraordinary meaning and significance. A symbol allows people to communicate beyond the limits of language. In literature, symbols help a writer to develop themes within a story. Remember, a couple of lessons ago, we discussed that an eagle would be a symbol of the United States. External conflict is when a character struggles with an outside force, such as another character or the environment. Internal conflict is when a character struggles with ideas or forces within him or herself. Let's go on to how to identify symbols, a review of the lesson we did a few lessons ago. So how to identify symbols. Here are 3 questions you can ask yourself if you spot something that you think might be a symbol. Remember, a symbol can be an object, event, person, or idea. So there are lots of literary images to consider. So remember, a symbol isn't just an object or animal like an eagle would be, all right? It can be an event, too, okay? So think of like an event like the Boston Tea Party, for example, might be a symbol of freedom, okay? Because the patriots at that time were trying to revolt against taxes and whatnot, and they wanted to be free from the tyranny of England. So that is an event that could be used as a symbol. So the 3 questions to identify a symbol: is the image repeated multiple times throughout the work? Is the image described in great detail? And does the image seem out of place in the work? Okay, you don't have to answer all 3 of those with the symbol, but if one or more of those answers to the question are present, is likely a symbol in your reading. And we'll go on to the theme of hope. There's a drawing of Anne Frank, or a painting of Anne Frank. In spite of everything, I still believe that people are really good at heart. Anne Frank. So she was hopeful throughout her entire time that she was in hiding. So, well, before we get into the questions, I wanted to tell you, too, if you are ever in Boise, and you're ever in downtown Boise, at the main library there on Capitol Boulevard, across from the entrance to the Art Museum and the History Museum and the zoo, that building that says library with an exclamation point on it, if you go behind there, there is an Anne Frank Memorial Garden back there, and there are some really cool things back there. If you go, and it's free and it's open all the time, so it's right next to the Greenbelt. It shows the outline of the rooms in the annex and how much room they had, and all those, you can think about all those people living together in that small space, and you might be able to put yourself in their place a little bit better and think of, the emotions and the conflict that might have come up, having to be quiet and be in hiding and not sure what was going to happen and what their outcome will be. So that's a really cool place to go, the Anne Frank Memorial, behind the main Boise Library. Anyway, so the theme of hope actually becomes really evident when you go to that Anne Frank Memorial in Boise, because you wonder how she could have had all the hope she did when you go and see that and read some of the things there. Anyway, so some questions on your test related to hope. According to Mr. Frank, how did Anne feel in the concentration camp in Holland? Was she afraid of the Nazi soldiers? Was she sad to be apart from Peter? Happy to be outside once again, or fatigued from the hard labor duties? Well, she was probably a lot of all of those things, but after Mr. Frank got out of the concentration camp, he related that Anne was actually happy because she got to be outside once again. So there is another, there's more evidence that she had hope. Another question on your quiz will be in Act 2, Scene 2. Anne discusses her hopes and dreams for the future with Peter. Do you remember if she did that? Yes, she did. She had hope and she discussed them with Peter. And I think you probably would had to have had hope if you were locked up in that annex for the amount of time that they were. Gosh, what a scary situation. All right, some questions about mood that are going to be on your quiz are, what is the mood in the secret annex after its inhabitants learn of the Allies' invasion? Okay, remember World War II was going on at the time, and the Allies were the United States and other countries that banded together to help people escape the persecution of the Nazis. Okay, so the Allies invaded, and they were trying to confront the Nazis and overthrow them. So, what was the mood in the secret annex after they learned of the Allies' invasion? Did they not believe the news and they were hesitantly optimistic? Or are they joyful because they think the war will end soon? Are they angry because they feel like the Allies are taking too long? Or are they sad because they know they'll be leaving the annex soon? Yeah, no, that last one definitely isn't true. They really did not want to be in the annex. But they are joyful because they think the war will end soon. And the war actually did end fairly soon after that. But it was unfortunate that some things happened in the interim. So what does Mr. Van Daan decide to sell that upsets Mrs. Van Daan? Was it Peter's cat, Mrs. Van Daan's jewelry, Mrs. Van Daan's fur coat, or Anne's diary? Yep, it was Mrs. Van Daan's fur coat. And that is actually comes to be a symbol in the story because Mrs. Van Daan's fur coat to her became a symbol of the outside world and a symbol of her old life. And so losing it to her meant that she was losing her old life, her outside life. More questions that will be on your quiz. What does meat bring to the annex to celebrate the new year? Do you remember? Did she bring cake, beans, cookies, or extra rations? Yes, she brought cake, and they were really excited because that was not something they got very often. What issue does Mr. Crawler want to discuss privately with Mr. Frank? Does he want to discuss business accounts of the Peckham business? Does he want to discuss news reports coming from the front lines of the war? Does he want to discuss the academic achievements of the children in hiding? Or does he want to discuss a workman he suspects knows about the secret annex? Yeah, unfortunately, he wants to talk about a workman he suspects knows about the secret annex, and that, sadly, is what led to the downfall of them being discovered. So, which character is described as being disgruntled, Peter, Mr. Frank, Mr. Dussel, or Mr. Van Daan? Remember at the beginning we said disgruntled means displeased or discontented. Okay, we are not on the right. There we go. So, which one was being described as being disgruntled? Yeah, Mr. Dussel. And which character decides that Mr. Van Daan should leave the secret annex because he has been caught stealing food? Is it Miep, Mr. Crawler, Mrs. Frank, Mrs. Van Daan. Yeah, it's Mrs. Frank. She thinks Mr. Van Daan should be put out because he's been stealing food. Yeah, emotions were running high at the time. There wasn't a lot of food. They had to be quiet all day long. They could never go outside. They had to be in that small place for such a long time. More questions that will be on your test. Whose feelings is Anne afraid of hurting by her friendship with Peter? Her father, her mother, Margot, or Mrs. Van Daan? Yeah, she's afraid of hurting Margot's feelings because Margot is more Peter's age, and she kind of likes Peter too, and Anne knows that. So why does Mrs. Frank accuse Mr. Van Daan of being a poor father? Is it because he's unable to help Peter with his academic studies? Is it that he's caught stealing bread while the children go hungry? Is it that he threatens to throw Peter's cat Mooshy out in the street? Or is it that he is never satisfied with Peter and belittles him in front of the others? Yeah, remember Mr. Van Daan was caught stealing food, and so Mrs. Frank accuses him of being a poor father because of it. Desperate times make people act differently than they may have in a normal situation. So then on your quiz, you're going to have to read this excerpt from the Diary of Anne Frank. It helps a lot to have someone talk to, don't you think? It helps you let off steam. What type of figurative language is being used in this excerpt to let off steam? Is that an idiom, a simile, a metaphor, or alliteration? Yeah, it's an idiom because you can't literally let steam off of your body. But to let off steam means to be able to relax a little bit and to de-stress a little bit. And a few more questions that will be on your quiz. So you read this excerpt from the Diary of Anne Frank. Mr. Crawler is in the hospital. It seems he has ulcers. Pym says we are his ulcers. Who is the speaker in this excerpt? Is it Anne, Margot, Miep, or Mrs. Frank? Yeah, it's Anne who's saying that Mr. Crawler's in the hospital. And Pym says that we are his ulcers because, you know, traditionally people think of ulcers as being caused by stress. And yeah, that's a stressful situation. So, how does Anne feel about Peter in Act 2, Scene 2? 1, she's wondering if he's too shy. 2, she's becoming attracted to him. 3, she is jealous that he is interested in Margot. Or 4, she is angry with him because he teases her. Yeah, we start to find out that Anne is becoming attracted to Peter. And where is Miep on the day the secret annex is raided? Raided means that's the day that the Nazi soldiers came in and discovered them and escorted them out. So, is she visiting family in the country? Has she been arrested by the Nazis? Is she searching for food to bring to the annex? Or is she hiding because she knows the Nazis are coming? Now, she's searching for food to bring to the annex, unfortunately. So she had no idea that was going to happen, and she couldn't warn the people staying there. So, good luck on your quiz. You've got this, says the little puppy. So, you are watching this video, so you must call me. There's both of my phone numbers. I'll just ask you for a brief summary of what you saw in this video. And if you have any questions, and that's it. But I need to talk with you in person. So try both of those phone numbers if you don't get me at one. And if you need to leave a message, please leave a message at both numbers. Okay, because there's a good chance that if you leave a message on my cell phone, say on a Thursday night, that I won't get it until Monday when I'm back in service again. Okay, because the other phone number is my home phone number, which is where I would be likely to get it on a Friday. Okay, so leave a message at both. Try both, please. And again, good luck on your quiz, and I will talk to you later. Bye.